do it.
And we should be live.
Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
Hello, everybody. I'm so used to, on these live streams, saying hello, patrons, because we do our patron live streams. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Spook-E Livestream, our first, the inaugural Spook-E Livestream. There's been a bunch of inaugurals during this year's Spook-E.
Yeah, we've inaugurated a lot of stuff.
We, if you're out there in the chat, say hello. If you can hear us and see us okay, make sure that we know it. Also, if you're just here watching, say hello and let us know that you're here in the audience. I see some hellos already. Fantastic. It is early November.
Yes.
We are on the tail end. In fact, this is the last thing for 2023's Spook-E season. We put out, as usual, 4 episodes of Spook-E Speculative Evolution episodes throughout the month of October on this year's theme of dragons, and a bonus episode.
Yeah.
We introduced Cute-E this year, which is something we've talked about with patrons for a while, and we were very excited to finally put it out there.
It was a lot of fun getting to add that in. It's something I've been wanting, like ever since it got brought up. I've wanted to do it. We just couldn't figure out how we wanted to fit it in.
Yes. So that's something that we can talk more about if people want to hear it. The way that we like to do live streams is hop in the chat, ask us questions, make some comments, and we'll respond. And you can engage with us and help drive this discussion. We've already gotten a ton of people in here who are hellos. Ubi, Nicholas, J, Eva, Ryan, Bluebird. There's so many of them. Hello to everybody. I see some people are doing the thing where they say hello from such and such place, which is awesome. Feel free to do that. We've got Germany and Ithaca.
That's cool.
So far.
That's very cool.
Ryan has asked, do I see a friendly dragon on Will's computer?
It is a friendly croc.
It is a friendly croc.
Yeah, we got. There's a couple others. There they are. We got those from a listener, but I can't remember who it was because it was a while ago.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stickers back there that are from listeners who have sent us cool stuff.
I don't have enough room to put every sticker we get, but I usually try to pick a couple when we get stickers and add them to my laptop now. So yeah, friendly croc. So better.
So as the chat is getting going, let's just very briefly, Will. So Spook-E is one of the coolest things we do. Listeners really like it.
It's a lot of fun.
Spook-E is your baby in many ways.
Yes.
How do you feel about our sixth, right? Sixth Spook-E.
It was a lot.
We've done dragons.
It was a good one. We've had the idea for dragons since the beginning. Like that was one of the first ideas. We struggled with thinking of how we wanted to do dragons, whether we would do aspects of the dragons or specific dragons, like do Smog and then do Rain of Fire dragons and then do Falcor, like pick different individual dragons, and we finally decided to do it regional dragons,
like categories, sort of like cultural categories of dragons,
and it was so much fun. It was a great one. It was neat because there was more overlap than there usually is, so we were able to purposely get more creative in certain situations and go, well, we already did that, so let's not do that this time.
Yes.
So let's do something different this time. And that was nice. I liked having that added caveat put in.
Dragons was a ton of fun on top of all that because it's also, unlike basically every other Spook-E season, these are fictional creatures that we have both already thought about from an evolutionary standpoint, as have many of our listeners.
Yes.
We got a lot of comments. A lot of the time we'll get comments from fans who will say, hey, you did this Spook-E episode. Here are some of my thoughts that I thought of while listening, which is awesome. This one we got more of, hey, when I have considered this in the past, here's what I've thought of. And we had the same thing. I was saying, I think on one of our Patreon chats, that the evolutionary explanation we went with for our European dragons to give them that extra pair of limbs is my personal pet version of doing that.
Yep.
So that was something that I had already had thought of because they're dragons and you kind of can't help but engage with that kind of thinking.
Yeah, daydreaming about dragons is kind of what humans do. And so
Yes.
it was one where, because a lot of the other ones we've done, we will, hit upon ones that have had that done tons of times, like vampires and werewolves, where those have been reimagined a million times, but then we get to some where not as often, like fish people,
Right.
where those don't come up as much other than references to Black Lagoon.
Mm-hmm.
And so every night, we get a lot of monsters where it's kind of our first time really exploring the monster. I'm usually familiar with the lists before I take notes, but I don't usually know a bunch of the monsters in detail.
Right.
So there's a whole bunch where it's the first time we're really giving any thought to this monster ever. And so, it's a very fresh take. Dragons, we kind of, there's a vibe going into it that we already knew.
Yes.
What we sort of want. We didn't know what the answer was going to be. Well, we knew, we had some ideas, we had some feelings, which was cool.
Yes. Is your cursor hovering over a button?
Okay,
I couldn't see from here. We have had it before on live streams where we'll notice that the cursor is hovering over the end stream button, and I couldn't tell if that's what that was. Like we said, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for this live stream. This is a spooky live stream. So any comments, questions, things you want to hear about this year's spooky, past spookies, future spookies, hop in the chat and let us know. We've gotten some things. Jay said the inaugural cutie was everything I could have hoped for.
It was
It was so much fun. It was so weird and fantastic.
It was one where we weren't sure like how to pull it off or how much it was going to resemble other episodes when we were going into it. And then as I was taking the notes, I started seeing the outline and going, no, this is going to work. And It was great.
Melissa said, will you be revisiting past spooky themes for future Cute-E episodes? We've talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ideas that we had, we ended up deciding, we considered doing Cute-E as its own series.
Yes, like in February to
Right.
bookend off of Spook-E.
Right. And we ended up deciding to make it a little tag at the end of Spook-E, partially because that is a bit of a easier lead into the concept. Mm-hmm. It's a little easier for us. We get to start it out, test the waters. But also because it occurred to us that Cutie only makes sense as a joke off of Spook-E.
Like, cutilative evolution is not actually what Cutie stands for. Cutie is just a spoof.
Just Cutie. So separating it right off the bat from Spook-E felt a little bit weird.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to at least start with it as a little end cap. But when we were talking about what would Cutie look like as a series, one idea that we did consider is doing a series of Cutie that is basically what we did this year, but for all the previous themes.
Yes, pick 4 or however many we decided to go with for each theme we did and choose a cute creature that would have fit. And there's definitely some that I would love to go back to and do a full-on, Cute-E, Spook-E style episode for. Because, sea monsters, we've done a But We Digress for mermaids.
Yes, that was our first speculative episode.
But it was not the same as Spook-E was. Like, we didn't actually go through the history of mermaids, really. We didn't go through the stories about mermaids to really capture it. We just kind of, off the dome, all right, what are some ways you could get a fully aquatic primate kind of thing?
Right. So yeah, there's every possibility. We'll have to see, partially based on the reception, which so far, quite good. We'll have to see what we end up doing with Cutie in the future, and if it will, if every year it's going to be kind of like this, or if it'll spin off. Feel free to let us know your thoughts about Cutie, and that will inspire us to decide for the future.
Yes, yes.
Paleo Edit said, "Are you sticking with the spooky theme in this one?" Yes. This is all spooky all the time. That is our goal. Cameron has asked, would there be a chance of alien creatures in Spook-E? This is another thing that we've talked about.
Yes.
The short answer is, yeah, that's a theme that could absolutely make it into Spook-E.
Those ideas are on the list. There's a document where we keep track of some suggested ones and just ones we thought of, and where I brainstorm what groupings could work for a year. What monsters could go together to make a good theme. And so there's tons of aliens on there. The issue we usually run into is deciding how do we deal with the alien factor of the fact that specifically by the nature of those monsters, they're supposed to be non-Earth creatures.
So if we did that, would it be normal, spooky, they're just from Earth?
Yeah,
like
how do we
normal?
get an animal on Earth that looks like that alien?
Or do we come up with a twist to it that lets us go a little bit extraterrestrial?
Yeah, do we add in speculating the environment, what planetary ecosystem would evolve a creature that looks like a Star Trooper arachnid or xenomorph?
Right. So absolutely, aliens would be a ton of fun, but it would have to be a little bit weird
with caveats.
Which would be fun. That'd be very fun to come up with. On a similar sort of talking about the creatures that we choose, we got were Quetzalcoatl style dragons on the cutting room floor for this year's theme. So Quetzalcoatl is a Central South American mythical dragon serpent type creature. Those are the feathered serpents. We did talk about those.
Yes.
And we opted to leave them off of this year's list. There's always stuff that doesn't make it onto the list.
Mm-hmm.
Part of why we opted to leave them off is because we already had a lot of similarities in the groups that we were going with our dragons. But also, anytime we have to leave something off of the list, we very commonly will have the caveat to ourselves of, but if we ever do, for example, a American mythology season, that's something that could very nicely go into something like that.
Exactly. So like it could fit into other themes equally as well or better is often one reason a monster won't make it into one spooky year.
It's why we didn't do dragons for Dungeons and Dragons.
Exactly.
Because the theme we decided to help narrow it down was D&D originals.
Yes,
things that are
to
very
the game.
iconic to D&D. And dragons are important for D&D, but they're not original to D&D.
Yeah,
so
Gary Gygax did not come up with dragons.
Right.
And so, that one was on the cutting room floor. Another one that a bunch of people were talking about on the Discord were like worms, as in like the
like the lindworm.
Yeah, the lindworm, the Scandinavian, serpentine, but usually portrayed with front limbs. Type dragons. And the reason they didn't make it in for me was because when I looked up lindworms and just worms as a dragon, the description of them being serpentine was not actually consistent. Mm-hmm. Typically that was just the name for dragons in that land among those people. So there was tons of lindworms that have 4 legs and 2 wings that just are dragons.
So we kind of looped them into...
Yeah.
The first episode of this Spooky was very funny. I think very funny from a structural standpoint because we cheated a whole bunch.
Oh, yeah.
That European Dragons was our excuse to go, we know what the next 3 episodes are going to be. So while we're doing a whole clade, let's throw a little comment to a bunch of different types of dragons and we can incorporate them into this family.
Well, and it was also kind of there to really hit upon the fact that the term dragon is and has been non-specific throughout history. Very rarely has the term dragon meant one specific thing. In maybe single enclosed cultures, there have been like, well, this is what we consider a dragon. But they're using the same name that another group is using for a completely different monster.
Yes.
So it was kind of there to put in there's not really a rule as to what makes a dragon. If you look across all of history, there are ones that would definitely contradict being a dragon compared to another group of people's dragon. We kind of use that first episode as our grab all and as a exploring the term.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we always have to sort of narrow it down, and pick and choose what's gonna end up being in there.
Yeah, because it's innately monsters are not a cleanly categorized subject. People mix and match them throughout telling the stories throughout history.
Yes. Now, and I also saw somebody in here, my chat's jumping around, Brendan mentioned dune worms. Worms is also, again, could be a future Spooky. We could do just an all worms Spooky season.
That's
there's
been one
always the space to put those things that didn't make it.
That's been one I've been trying to see if I could find a good grouping, because I don't know, that list makes me happy. The idea of doing that series makes me happy.
We've got also hellos from South Africa, from Scotland.
Cool.
There was a Montana. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Oh, man, a bunch of... Serpentine said, I can't stress how excited I was to see the original Tarrasque get some attention. That was a fun weird one.
Yep. I did not know much about the original Tarrasque until doing that research, and that was very interesting.
We also, what was there's so many things. This is great. Thank you all so much for joining in. I did notice, by the way, that a handful of people were saying nice things about my nails. And thank you. I saw that. I appreciate that. Melissa says, a book recommendation for Dragon fans, the Temeraire series. I actually just recently started reading the Temeraire series. I got halfway through book 2 before I got distracted, and I have to go back to it.
Yeah, I haven't started. I've been told about it, but I have not jumped into them yet.
Yes. Let's see. Cameron mentioned the idea of doing iconic giant monsters, which that's another thing that we've considered. That would also have to be a weird one of what do we do with the super giant size?
Exactly. Like if we do a kaiju series, the square cube law, things cannot get that big.
Right.
So do we just do a moderate size? Do we just do as big as animals can get? It would be in the spirit of kaiju, probably more than as close as we can get to Godzilla and so forth. So yeah.
Another comment, I think this was from Cameron, who said, would you do a series on leftover monsters from previous themes? And we actually have talked about that idea.
Of the runners-up.
Of doing a runners-up season of Spook-E. And then someone else has just asked, may I ask what other creatures have gotten left out over the years? Or is that confidential because they're potential future episodes? That would be a lot of fun. We kind of... I had pitched that idea as maybe something for last year because there would have been 4 previous Spooky themes.
Yep.
And we could have done 1 episode for each. And we ended up deciding not to do it because it felt more fun to do a new theme.
Yes.
That we only get to do this once a year, so we thought let's keep adding new themes to it because that's part of the fun.
And so yeah, it's definitely not something. It's not off the table. It's not unreasonable that we couldn't do that, but it is. I would be hesitant because doing a new theme is exciting and new. Doing a runners-up would be fun, but there's not a runners-up for each year that I am sorely sad we didn't get to.
Right.
Like we didn't do the Attack of the Mating Tomatoes.
Yeah, Killer Tomatoes was on our list for. We've talked about this. I think we've talked about this on our Patreon stuff. That often what happens with Spooky is that we need 4 episodes and we get the list down to 5.
Yep.
That kind of seems to be the pattern that we often end up with 3 that we're like absolutely these, and then we have to choose between 2.
Yeah,
and that usually ends up being the weird one at the end. With D&D, I don't mind revealing. We Beholders, already forgetting what we did. Owl Bears, Displacer Beast were like, absolutely those 3 are going to be on there.
Yeah, I think Beholder and Owl Bear we said in the first mentioning of the idea for the theme.
And then the 4th was a fight. It was a little bit of a back and forth between Mimic, which is what we went with, and Gelatinous Cube.
Yes, which that would be one of those ones where it's like, oh, that
would be very fun.
That's a shame.
So maybe sometime in the future we'll do a spin-off thing or some bonus content. But then at the same time, there's always going to be stuff we don't get to. It's kind of the nature of Spooky.
There's more monsters than there is time to talk about them. So yeah.
We've got other suggestions. We've got people saying Pokemon. We've got other video game creatures. Somebody mentioned Buffy monsters. I'd have to learn anything about Buffy.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I don't know anything about Buffy.
I watched it. I watched it, but I was not a fan, like an avid watcher. So I don't know any specific Buffy monsters. Yeah, there's some good lists out there. Like Pokemon comes up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And Pokemon we talked about, and Pokemon's kind of tricky because they are innately superpowered most of the time.
Yep.
Like many of them are made of fire and
Right.
whatnot. And so like it's the same issue where early on in Spooky we got lots of suggestions for things like witches and magic-y human type things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that we couldn't do some of those, but they're definitely trickier to get around the magic disclaimer of like we'd have to disclaim a lot of this creature to really get anything we could evolve. So yeah, there's some topics like that aren't impossible but are tricky.
Yeah, we have to find ways to narrow things down and pick and choose the ones that work best within the spooky framework.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we try to pick things that are going to be generally recognizable and enjoyable. None of that's to say that we won't do Pokemon.
No, it's definitely can be.
Or video game creatures or anything like that.
Kind of like what we said with Kaiju and Aliens. We'd have to figure out, are there Pokemon we won't choose? Like, is Magnemite off the list?
Right, because that is an artificial thing.
Because you are made of magnets.
We have a couple people here commenting about fan art. So Cameron said, I'm Artmaker Productions, which we've gotten a bunch of art from them. Someone else, Landon, I think, said, I just emailed more fan art. We've gotten a ton of awesome fan art this year.
It's been very cool.
We mentioned this on the Spooky episodes, that the fan art that we get is so much fun. It's so cool to see people bring our made-up creatures to life on the page. This year, the dragon fan art was so cool this year, and I've heard from some people who it seems like we have not seen all of it.
Yeah.
Rob was saying that he might send us some dragon art that he's been working on.
Yeah.
The fan art's so cool. If you haven't, check out our website. We've got a fan art page there, and there's a whole spooky section. Down at the bottom is all the dragons. It's so good. Such cool fan art this year.
Yeah, no, the fan art is so wonderful. I'm a huge fan of fan art in general. Like, I love getting to see other people's take on a thing. Just this is how I would draw Godzilla or the Power Rangers or whatever. I love seeing the alt versions because it's very concept art-esque. Here is another cool version that thing could have taken. But getting to see it with something we created is so great because I am a very visual person, but I'm not typically great at creating the image in my head unless I've just come up with some very specific visuals. So there's lots of times where I have the idea, but I don't have a picture.
Right.
And
same. Yeah, I often don't have an actual picture. It's words.
Yes, it is concepts. I've got the idea, but I can't actually tell you the details. Like, I know when something's close or not, but that's about it. And then someone draws fan art, and very often it'll be like, there, now I have a picture. Now I have something to put with that document. And it is very satisfying to get to see what we created and finally visualize it.
Yeah. And sometimes it's fan art and it is exactly what was in our heads. It's like that, you did it, that's it. Other times there'll be like a fun spin on it.
Yep.
Or sometimes there'll be fan art that incorporates something that I forgot we mentioned in the episode. Like, and we got one fan art that was the East Asian dragon, and it had eggs in its mouth. And I was like, oh, that's right, I forgot we had talked about the egg. That's super cool. I love that artists will put in little details that either we mentioned or that they thought of. And it's one of the things that we've talked about in the past. We are very intentional with Spooky that we don't actually come up with a thing.
Yes.
There's not like a correct answer at the end of Spooky, because that's not what Spooky is.
No.
It's a thought experiment.
Well, I know I also am coming at that from the mentality of evolutionary discussion of like, there's multiple ways evolution can take to get to the same shaped creature we're describing. Like, that's happened. That's what convergent evolution is.
Yes.
So I don't want to portray that there is one path to dragon, because that surely isn't the case. Evolution's way more crazy than that.
And the fan art is always a really cool tie-in with that, because every artist has their own little spin to it.
Yep.
So it means that, we've gotten, 3 or 4 different versions of the fish person in the time since we put that episode out. And they're all quite distinct from each other, and they're all fantastic.
Yes.
And they're all, these are all different ways that this could end up being. And that's really fun. It really sort of fits in well with that conceptual, sort of loose and open way that we approach Spook-E.
Because speculative evolution has a lot of really good practical uses of exercising your scientific mind and keeping in mind the variety of things that can happen. It's a good thought experiment.
Mm-hmm.
But it is also just fun and important for just encouraging creativity.
Yes.
And just exploring the neat options that could be, and that's one of my favorite things about it. So getting to see fan art that is doing the same thing is wonderful.
We've got a bunch of other people suggesting. Someone, Tentenshu said Zerg and Protoss units from StarCraft. Every now and then we think Pokemon has a little bit of this too,
Yep.
where we try to find the balance between. We try to make it something that's not too niche.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to do a Zerg and Protoss. Zerg and Protoss units would be tons of fun. That's one where I would worry that not enough people would actually know what we're talking about. Pokemon has a similar thing.
Yes.
Where if it's not going to be
the big
names. Now, that being said, we did D&D.
Yes.
So, we exactly how tightly we adhere to that. We stick to our own rules. But we did D&D, at least couched in between more familiar stuff. People are suggesting Animorphs, which is a very similar feeling of the very cool. Very familiar with the Animorphs monsters, but also very specific.
Yep. The Zerg is an interesting situation in my mind, because Zerg and Tyranids would give similar opportunities for the discussion, but by their nature, it almost feels like each individual Zerg would really need to be its own episode, because that's
kind of the whole.
That's the whole thing, is we have absorbed a species into our collective, and Tyranids are very much the same thing. If we've absorbed the DNA from Warhammer, the DNA of this race, and made a unit out of it, so it's like there is not really much of a central biology between them. So. I want to, but it feels like they'd either have to be a very simplified version, or it'd have to be a Zerg gear.
Well, and
Tyranid gear.
We have to the big limiting factor, the two big limiting factors with Spook-E are, one, we limit ourselves to monsters, which we've already started to break out of with Cutie. And two, we only do it once a year, and we only do 4 episodes.
Yep.
So maybe in the future there will be more Spook-E content, more spin-off stuff to let us get to... Because these are all fantastic ideas, and they all come with their own caveats, their own considerations. They'd be tons of fun to do. If we could do Spook-E all year round, we could do everything.
Oh, yeah. Well, the other thought I've had in regards to things like Tyranid, Zerg, and Xenomorphs, the aliens fall into this, is those are also kind of in a category a lot of monsters aren't, in that Xenomorphs are one of my things. Like the Alien movies.
Yes. Well, very much the way that if we did a Pokemon year for Spooky, it would be my year of Spooky.
Exactly.
I would just... Well, with the one time that we've done something kind of like that was 2 years ago with plants, where we did human-eating plants. And I was fresh off a several-month period of being obsessed with Little Shop of Horrors.
Just completely separate from Spook-E. Just happened
to do it. So when we got to that part in the episode, you can hear it in the episode where Will goes, David, explain Audrey 2. And I'm like, happily.
Ready.
I did not have notes. I just had... Yeah, Xenomorphs would be like, all right, no notes are necessary for this. That's just Will's episode.
But I run into the issue whenever I try to think of that, of like, how many of the comics do I actually mention?
Right.
Because, the movies don't explain their origins at all, because I ignore those two that tried to. But the comics do it like 5 different times. And so it's like, do I mention all of them? Do I just mention there's multiple? How deep down my rabbit hole do I take you, the audience?
Mike has made a super chat, I think is what these are called, super comment.
Oh, yeah.
A donation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike.
Mike said, hello, gents. Thank you for helping me to beguile the hours at work. Have a glass of something appropriate on me. 3 hearts, the uploads. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
For that. Thank you again to everyone who is here participating and engaging and showing us that we're not just talking into an empty void.
I always have that imposter syndrome moment before we do things like live streams of like, is anyone going to show up?
Like 5 minutes before this, I looked at and the thing said like 7 people are waiting, and I was like, "Oh, 7 people? That's it. All right, I guess that's the spooky audience."
Yep, that'll be.
And then it jumped up, and I was like, "Oh, okay, great."
But I always have, and then people have shown up, and it's been great. So thank you all.
We got. Oh, there's so many. There was another comment that I was going to mention, and it was Oh no, where did it go? Otaku said the unfortunate aspect about doing spooky about established IPs is that it would be a legal nightmare when you write your spooky setting books in retirement.
We also consider that every time.
We do talk about that. Yep. That if because we've talked about doing spooky additional content, people have often said, could you come up with like spooky stat blocks, like D&D stat blocks for spooky creatures? We've talked about doing like a spooky book or something like that where we get to expand on this kind of stuff. And we are very aware that like, yeah, we could do that. We can't use the word Triffids. Yeah. And we can't refer to Wizards of the Coast properties if we did something like that.
And so there are definitely years where, it's very often, like with plants, the rest of our plants could make it in. Triffids probably would be just left out of our the official Spookyverse.
Or if we just have to talk to a lawyer and be like, how similar is it allowed to be before is it just that we can't say the word Triffids?
Yep.
Where's the line there?
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a bunch we could get away with. There's also part of me that I'm not sure how much I want to
appropriate the existing content.
And like the other ones are classic, open source monsters, and that feels like it. Somewhere in my mind, I think that is what pure spooky is, potentially. Yeah. I don't know that I actually stand by what I just said, but I think there's a little gut reflex of that. So it's like, well, but that's somebody else's monster.
Right. I think that I agree in the sense that spooky was created for that purpose.
Yes, that was the intention.
The years where it's classic movie monsters, Greek mythology, sea monsters, sort of the classic spookies are very pure. Yeah. In that sense that it's just, this is a monster. Everybody knows this monster. This goes back deep into mythology.
Where the monsters are concepts almost more than a specific creature.
And what makes those years stand out is that they aren't weird.
Yeah.
That like, D&D was a little bit weird because there wasn't a deep cultural history to explore. There was published materials that have all the official information about them. Dragons was a little bit weird because we had to kind of decide how we were going to deal with the categories. Great monsters was super straightforward. Yeah. And classic movie monsters was super straightforward. So that does feel like the sort of the classic style of spooky, and we've been exploring options off of that. Yeah. Now that being said, that's all. If we had started with dragons, then dragons would feel like
the baseline.
The baseline.
Yeah. So yeah. IP definitely comes up, and we keep it in mind. So it's not that we are doing all of spooky with the Spookyverse like end game in mind, but it comes up. We mention it.
Yeah, there'll be a final episode of Spooky, and they'll all get together, and then on your left, and they'll all come out of portals.
It's I kind of view our Spookyverse like the Star Wars situation, where you've got Legends, which includes all the copyrighted things as well, and then there's the official Spookyverse, which is all the things we wouldn't get sued for.
Yes, exactly.
There's kind of two canons going on with the Spookyverse. The one that you can write as much fan fiction as you want about because there's no issues there.
The extended
And the one if we decide to publish anything off of it, we'll publish it off of this one.
Or we just have to make a bunch of phone calls.
Yeah.
We have to, dear...
And we're millennials, and we don't want to do that.
Dear Jeremy Crawford, would it be okay? Please, such a fan. Have I told you how much I enjoy your work? Please let us.
Please check yes or no.
Please check yes or no. Can we publish our Beholder Monster? Please check yes or no. Let's see. Did you guys ever cover The Thing? We have not talked about The Thing. It's something people have suggested doing The Thing, either for silver screen or speculative. Speaking of aliens, also The Flood from Halo.
Yes. And that's the other thing that a lot of the aliens get into, is that many of them have such alien biologies that it's like, I don't even know what we would attempt to, like, what part of the thing are we evolving? Is it the cellular replacement? Is it the kind of... Yeah, like... So yeah, there's some aliens out there where it's... Well, and it's like also, if we're doing the classic alien sort of thing, Greys, you know, the big-eyed, big-headed, classic UFO aliens, don't really fit in Spooky, because that's just people. You know, that's just a humanoid thing that's not... Their evolution likely would be very similar to our own, sort of. So theirs is more about the tech. So yeah, aliens is always a weird one, because you end up butting against things where I don't know that there's a way to find an answer. Yeah. Because that's the point of that alien.
And we've considered, this is something we've also talked about on Patreon, the idea that one of the other big limiters with Spook-E is sticking to things in our wheelhouse.
Yes.
Right. The evolution of organisms, typically animals, biological evolution. It's why we leave out magic, and it's also why we leave out technology. It's why we don't get into culture too much, because we're trying to keep it sort of contained. But there's also the potential that maybe some year in the future we get like an engineer.
Yes.
And we go, all right, let's do one that is sort of tech focused. Or we get an anthropologist and we go, all right, let's talk about how culture develops. Those are things that are a little bit outside of our wheelhouse, and in some cases could also be outside of our comfort zone, not just from the standpoint of us not knowing things, but if we're going to get really deep into cultural stuff, now we have to start worrying about insult and accidentally offending people because we're misrepresenting. It's one of the reasons why when we talk about doing, we've done Greek monsters. We haven't done monsters of African mythology or monsters of Native American mythology. Those are things that we'd have to get somebody to help us with, because we don't want to, we don't want to further a misrepresentation or a stereotype or something without realizing we're doing it, which is less of a concern when it's stuff like dragons and sort of really popular common things that are also very popular Western things that have also sort of entered the global consciousness in a big way.
And yeah, the culture part, I often get... I am very hesitant around, because I love to do the brainstorming of what if this group of animals had a human-like culture? What parallels would I attribute? Like if I made a D&D race of crocodiles, what personality would I give them? But then that, as much fun as that is for me to do just in my head, it runs into the issue that D&D has run into of calling their different, obviously species, races.
Right.
And it's like, all right, but that's the same word we use for different groups of people, and suggesting that we are as different as a lizard folk and an elf is problematic. That is prone to racial issues. And so evolving a thing's culture based off of its evolution is doing a very similar thing of suggesting that a people's culture is based off of where they came from in their the wild ancestry. Which has a lot of gray area that you could very quickly be encouraging certain points of view and thought patterns that are not, we don't want to encourage.
Speaking of stuff that we're very cautious about, and they're things that we don't want to do on Spook-E, I saw way earlier Milu brought up the suggestion of doing cryptids.
Yes.
So cryptids, Bigfoot, Loch Ness, things like that. And that is another one that we've talked about in previous discussions, that we don't want to do cryptids for the reason that these are creatures who are proposed to exist in a way that is not in line with scientific evidence, but is a very common sort of pseudo-scientific
and science denial
movement, and often tied with science denial movements. And so what we would be doing is creating a discussion by a couple of scientists providing
a
reasonably sound explanations for how those creatures could come. And that feels a little bit too much like feeding the fire of something that we don't really want to do.
That someone could grab that episode and go, well, they make a lot of good points in this that we hadn't considered.
Yes.
And I want to be able to do a cryptids episode because I love learning about cryptids. Mm-hmm. I think they're fascinating from a culture standpoint. The fact that every group of people has cryptids, that many of them have similar cryptids, even in completely different situations.
We did a whole cryptozoology episode because it is this cool concept.
It's fascinating, and it has permeated scientific history. Just throughout the ages of having to address. A story has come forward of this thing. Is that legit? Do we need to go look for that? Should we take that in consideration when we consider the fossil record? Should we be looking for fossils of that? That's come up tons of times. So I would love to do a spooky, but I don't want to feed that fire that is still very much encouraging people to ignore the scientists and listen to these communities that are perpetuating these ideas.
Yeah.
So
we try to be mindful of those sorts of situations.
Yes.
With stuff like that.
Because not all monsters are equal in their cultural situations.
Someone did earlier, I think this was Landon, who pointed out on the note of the aliens thing, that an approach to it might be, instead of evolving the creatures, speculate on the environment that would evolve a alien environment. That's a pretty cool idea. That's a cool angle to come at it.
We've considered talking about adding that into the discussion of what kind of planet or something, but doing it focused on that would be very cool. That is on the edge of my wheelhouse comfort zone.
Right.
I feel like I'd want us to get an environmental scientist or an ecology person that has a better grasp of the inner workings of environments. So it's definitely possible, but yeah, I don't know if I'd be willing to be like, yeah, I can handle this.
Right. Next year's Spook, we'll have to see what we do for next year. We may return to something a little more familiar, or make it weird. Nerdbird said, would love an exploration on African mythological creatures. Serpentine said Australian too. If any of you know any people who are nerds who are experts on cultural stories of the world or cultural mythologies like that, we would love to know of some people, to get to know some people, because that's certainly something we'd be interested in doing.
Well, because one of the biggest hesitations for me with jumping into any of those is I'd be happy to do the historical discussion, because that would just be looking it up. Turning them into creatures, we might be missing some cultural context.
Absolutely.
I don't know how meaningful each of these are to the people who the stories belong to.
And I don't know how much of what we'd be reading on the common sources online is actually perpetuating common misrepresentations. Or did we decide to evolve this creature from this group of animals, and it turns out that group of animals is actually really bad in that culture for some reason, and just context that we're missing.
We pick on the wrong part of the story that we think that's the interesting part to talk of, and they're like, well, that's actually not the point of that monster. Lesson that monster is meant to teach is this lesson. You took this story from it, and that's not a monster. Yes, exactly. The Wendigo has come up, where it's that's not meant to be a movie monster. That's a cultural significant story. So it's just wanting to make sure we don't misuse it by accident.
Yes. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Veggie Stew has said a lot of these suggestions fit somewhere between Silver Screen and Spook-E to cover speculative evolution in pop culture. There are a lot of things. We mentioned the Thing earlier. We have gotten the Thing suggested as both a Spook-E theme and for Silver Screen Science. And there's overlaps. And we've done Silver Screen for stuff that could easily be, we did a Tremors Silver Screen.
Yeah.
And
that would be
we
great
could
for
absolutely
Spook-E.
do a Spook-E for something like Graboids from Tremors. So there is absolutely overlap, and that's something we could potentially explore in the future, is pop culture and speculative evolution within it. Cool.
Do combination episodes.
Yes. Listen, we can do whatever we want. We run this thing. This is our podcast. So this is going great so far. One thing that I wanted to note, because this is something that I know you'll enjoy, and I think that our audience will enjoy. At the beginning of every Spook-E episode, we have a little tradition, which is I say hello in a weird way. That happened.
Yes.
I've told the story of how this started. The first ever Spook-E episode was vampires, and we sat down and you said hello, and on a whim, I said hello, Will. I said greetings, Will, and I was that's funny. It's vampires.
Yep.
Cool.
And he has a count impression.
I know, like count impression.
That's just happens to be one of the voices he can do.
And then we sat down to do werewolves, and I was like, if I do it again, I will be doing it forever.
Yeah, you have to at least do it
I will be committed. And I did, and so that's become the bit. Usually what happens is I come up with what my hello is going to be, and then I just have them. This year I had a hard time narrowing down what my hellos were.
Because there's lots of dragons.
I have a bunch of runners up that Will hasn't heard most of these, and I'd love to share them. We did our 4 main Spook-E episodes, and I went and I knew from the start. I was like, all right, East Asian, I know exactly what I'm going to say. I just have to work on my Shenron impression.
Yeah, there's only one answer for that one.
And I did. I spent that day trying to get my voices deep and to do my Shenron impression. I was shocked when I heard it in the recording. It sounds way less bad than I thought it was going to sound.
No, it worked.
And I knew I was going to do the lion turtle for Turtle Dragons. And I ended up... that was another one I had to go look it up. I was like, I don't know what this guy says. He's got like 3 lines, and I'm going to say one of them. And I knew what my QD one was going to be.
Yes, yeah.
Which was, you just gestured to all of me.
Yeah.
Which is a very funny line from How to Train Your Dragon. I had such a hard time picking for European dragons and wyverns. And I went with the Smog quote for wyverns, and for European dragons, I went with use flamethrower, Will.
Yep.
I considered, for a while, I was back and forth between that and seismic toss. Which, seismic toss is a much more specific reference.
Yep.
That's specifically to the anime.
Yep.
But I had a few runners up for what my wyverns or European dragons would have been.
I'm here to hear them.
I considered, and I went and looked up doing one for European dragons, which would have been, now you shall deal with me, O prince, and all the powers of hell, Will. Which is the line that Maleficent says before she turns into a dragon. I had to look up the scene. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's a European dragon.
Yep.
I also considered Dracarys, Will.
Yes.
And another one that I know you would have enjoyed, and that I also had to look up, that I considered doing, Fusroda, Will! And I knew it would have gotten that reaction.
Yeah.
So I never have backups like this.
Yep.
This is the first time I've ever had a handful that I had written down and I didn't get to them. So those were the hellos that didn't make it into this year's Spook-E episodes.
Well, and I know we've said, but I don't know, like, he gets them ready, I say hello, and then I brace myself for whatever thing you say.
I don't know that it's happened yet, but every now and then I think of one, and I think to myself, this might be too funny.
Yes.
And Will won't be
really
able,
break the flow.
And I'll have to jump in and introduce Spook-E because Fusroda might have done it. And I was delighted at the reaction I got for Cutie. Because that's a very funny one. Jay said, every year I forget David does that, and it puts such a big smile on my face. Sometimes I forget that I do that.
Yep. Yeah, we'll be discussing it, and he'll go, oh, no.
I'm like, oh, that's tomorrow. I got to come up with something. I forgot the second year.
Mm-hmm.
We got, when the second year started coming around, and we got close to it, and I went, oh, I got to do the thing, don't I? I have to do that thing again.
Yep. That's your thing now.
It's the stupidest way to open a podcast. It's so dumb because it's very silly. It's always like niche jokes. It's always a reference to something that is very specific. It's a dumb joke, and it's the first thing in the episode. If an episode of Spook-E is the first thing that a person has ever listened to from our podcast, what a terrible way to be introduced. What a ridiculous self-sabotaging bit to put in the absolute first words in an episode. That is such a bad idea.
Oh well.
It's a joke for us.
I love it.
There have absolutely been Spook-E intros that I have done where I'm like, sometimes I'm like, we'll go with something that's a little more recognizable, and sometimes this is going to be a joke for Will.
Yep.
And that's going to be all it is.
Yep.
It'll be. That's what's going to keep happening.
I love it. It's just too much fun.
Mark Lar said, I recognize when it's happening, but I never realized that it was a tradition. Mm-hmm. It is a tradition in the same way that a lot of our stuff is traditions, which is that we did it twice.
Yep.
And then we got stuck.
Yep.
That's how Hello started. As the first ever episode. We went, hello, Will, hello, David. And we sat down to do episode 2, and you did the same thing because it was your episode. Mm-hmm. And then episode 3, we were like, if we do it again,
we're stuck.
That's it. That's what it's going to be forever. And we did, and it was. Oh man. Someone who actually approves of the sound of their own voice in a recording. But yeah, I did not. I was not expecting to.
I've gotten used to the sound of my own voice in a recording, to where it doesn't have any effect on me. Early on, I hated it. Yeah. Early on, I was like, why do I sound so high-pitched and, like, I sound so weird compared to how I... and now it's just, I don't even notice.
I've been inoculated.
Yeah.
Spent the last several years building up an immunity to the sound of my own voice. Serpentine said, if you don't entertain yourself, then what's even the point of doing the podcast at all? We try to be very mindful when doing the podcast that we aren't just devolving into inside jokes.
Yes.
Or making our pop culture references too all-encompassing, because we want this to be accessible, and if there's too much of that stuff, it can really put people off. But no, every now and then, and it's always an active choice. It's never an accident. I'll think of a joke. I'll say, no one's going to know what I'm talking about. And then I'll say, this for now, that's fine.
Yep.
This one's for Will.
Yep.
We'll laugh, we'll move on, and people will be confused. We don't get them as much these days. Comments from people who are like, I understood that reference and I appreciated it.
Yep.
We used to get those more often, and it was always delightful to hear those.
Yeah, no, we definitely don't want to accidentally be kind of gatekeepy in the amount of jokes or references we make.
Right. If you haven't seen all of the MCU movies, then this podcast isn't even for you.
Yes, exactly.
It's like this science podcast that has nothing to do with that.
But yeah, no. If we're not having fun, it's a lot harder to make the podcast.
But we have to have a good time. So yes, there was another thing I was going to say, and I lost it.
I saw someone. I think mine scrolled back. No, there it is. Jenny Wolfie asked about yokai-themed Spook-E with kappas and kitsune, and that's one I've thought about. Mostly because of the kappas, because I love kappas. I think they're great. And so I've had that on my list to do a yokai themed year. So absolutely, that could be one of the ones that comes up. because there's just some good ones in there.
Yes. Did we want to share some art?
Yeah, I think we can
do. You have the art around?
I can get it very quickly.
Cool. We were talking about the fan art before, and we got so much cool artwork that we thought it would be really fun to share some of it on here and make some comments. Somebody also was asking, what is my nail color inspired by? This is a color, this was actually given to me, this is a gift that I started painting my nails within the last year or two. And a thing that I've discovered that happens when you start painting your nails as an adult is that you are inevitably friends with a bunch of people who have tons of leftover nail polish, and tons of people who are excited to see somebody getting into this thing that has just been something that they've been doing for a long time.
Yep.
So for quite a long time, I did not pay for nail polish because I kept getting it as gifts, and I kept having people who are like, here's my leftover nail polish that I've had for years. Knock yourself out. So this was a gift. I recently did purchase a couple of nail polish colors for myself, which I didn't have to do previously. So this isn't really directly inspired by anything. This is just, I went with blue a couple days ago. It is, however, the reason that I also wore this shirt, and it's also why I have a little blue. My hair tie is blue. I'm coordinating because, we gotta look good for all of our devoted, beloved fans.
Absolutely. All right, I should be able to bring up.
Yeah, let's look at. So this is our website, everybody. Check it out.
Let's see if I can. Boop. So, and everyone, let us know if it is or isn't showing up for you correctly.
Yes.
But yeah, we've got our fan art page, and then after our general fan art, we have Spook-E.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have it. I don't have it like broken up by year, but each monster has their own little section in each little gallery.
Yeah.
So we got all of our early stuff, which is fantastic. I come in here every now and then just to scope in and mess around and reorganize and enjoy all of these because they're great.
And so since this year dragons are most recent, they are down here at the bottom. There's just such cool art. And this isn't, we just got an email. Landon just said that they sent us an email. So there's more art than what is just on here that we haven't sorted through yet. But the art for this year is so...
It's fantastic.
Cool.
It's great. I usually try to put them up kind of in order as we get them in each category, so that they're somewhat chronological, though sometimes I have to reorganize just so that they sit better. But they're so good.
I love all the patterns on the wings for the European dragons that these artists did. All three of these have I love that we run the gamut from like that previous one, which is intimidating and sort of putting on a scary display, to that last one, which is adorable. I love that we get a bit of both.
I didn't notice this until looking at it just now, but this one has glands on the legs just like lizards do. Like,
oh yeah,
it's got those little glands. Now I want to see art of someone expressing their dragon's leg glands and then clearing out the blocked glands with their little legs sticking up in the air the way they do when they're all awkward. It's great. That's the
one I was talking about with the eggs in the mouth. That's our East Asian dragon,
which is fantastic.
The gills.
It's got a bunch of extra toes because it's early tetrapod.
Yes,
and so very awesome. Yeah. This year was just so much fun.
Yeah, this just super cool wyvern.
And I guess we should be saying this is by Paleo Creations, as was...
Yes, all of these are credited here on the page.
These two are also Paleo Creations. Then we have Kate. Oh, I don't actually know how to say the rest of the tag.
I can't see it from all the way over here. But Kate, it's a last name.
Yep. And then Bone Salad was a cute one. And then we have Art Maker with this pterosaur.
Yeah, who is in here? That was a person who was commenting earlier.
Yeah.
So thank you for these.
And a very vulture-y one.
Yeah.
From Desi.
I love seeing how different artists interpret the stuff that we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And we even got some terrasses.
Yeah!
Some of our turtle dragons with a horse for scale.
Ryan made sure that it is
longer than a horse. Absolutely, which is exactly what we want. This one was fun for me because the first time I looked at it, I didn't notice that there was a little baby on the back of the one on the back, which is very cool.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
And we even got some friendly dragons.
Yep. We've got some from Artmaker, friendly dragons, and I love their sloth-like claws. So it's been a ton of fun.
Yes, we have Jenny Wolfie has asked, did you even get fan art of the vampire and hydra worm? We did.
Yeah, we did. Let's back up here.
The vampire. So the hydra worm.
Yep. Whoop.
Made a real mess of it.
We got the hydra down here.
So our hydra worm. Very cool. Our sand striker worm hydra.
I love the Hercules facing off against him. It's great. And then we have a modern day one taking down a kayak.
Yep, which is so cool.
So yeah, these are great.
The vampire Vampire was the first episode we ever did.
Mm-hmm.
And we evolved this shrew-like creature. And the picture this shrew that was the first art. I don't remember if it was the very first art that we ever saw of Spook-E fan art, but it was the first one I remember seeing and going, being absolute. That is, it is so awful.
Yes,
in the best way. It may be the worst art we've ever gotten. And I love it. Not worst in terms of quality. That creature is awful.
It's so terrifying.
It's such a disgusting, terrible creature, and I love it so much.
Yeah,
that was the first. That one sticks out of my mind because it was the first one that ever made me gasp.
Well, and we got one that has info that they wrote up for it, and an infographic for them. The thing that makes me so happy with the vampire art is the vampire episode is it stands out slightly in Spook-E just because we hadn't gotten into the groove yet. So we didn't.
Right.
It was our first time doing it. So the vampire ends up being a little bit, and our werewolf is similar in this regard, where we were trying to get aspects of the monster into an animal, and then as the years went on, we got more and more into the idea of an animal that would elicit the stories of, the monster. Right. And I still like what we came up with those, but they definitely stand out. So it makes me very happy that people still enjoyed them and made art of them. Like,
yes,
it's because you always have that moment of like, do our early episodes, right? If we could redo them, should we?
We got a comment. Otaku said, I recently went back and listened to some of your older episodes, and you all definitely sound more comfortable in the podcasting thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't listen to our early podcasts.
Nope.
I can't. I don't. That is not the sound of my voice. It's the quality of my performance.
Yes.
I don't.
Yeah, as a rule, it's not something we typically go back to. But it is nice when someone will reference one of the early episodes as enjoying it, and with Spook-E that we got art for those early episodes, even though we hadn't figured out the routines, so to speak.
It's always lovely when people getting comments is always great. Every now and then we'll get a compliment from someone who, because we've talked about not feeling about the early episodes that they weren't as good, and we've had people who will say, no, those are some of my favorites. Every now and then we'll get someone who's like, my favorite episode. We've had people who are like, Ceratopsians is my favorite. That's 87 is my favorite episode. And every time I'm like, the one with all the audio issues, the one where I sound like I'm underwater.
Yeah.
Awesome. Because I am so like,
it's hard not to be self-conscious.
Right. I'm like, but that one sounds terrible. And they're but that's a great episode. And it's always lovely to hear people who are like, the quality of the content is doing it for people, even when we're not as good as we want it to be, or there was audio issues and stuff. That's always lovely to see.
I was just writing director's note for this upcoming episode.
That comes out in several hours.
Yep. And slight spoilers and behind the scenes for anyone who's not a patron. I had a similar feeling with this one of I can see tons of things in this last episode that I wish I had done better and differently. Even though I know it probably won't ruin the episode for most people, but I can see those things. And it is often a fine line to remember that you should still take lessons from those moments.
Yes.
But the audience, this happened when I was a tour guide. My tours, when I would be like, man, I was off my game. Like, I did not hit any of the beats. I kept forgetting things until people asked me about a thing that I should have mentioned like 10 minutes ago. But the group always had a great time.
Yep.
Like, it was very rare that I felt off about a tour and the group was like, yeah.
Yep,
no. Us too.
Yeah, you were right. Let's start over.
What is your refund policy? Yeah.
Do you give tips?
Yeah.
Do you provide tips, and reimbursement for people?
It's like, it is important to remember. It's that whole thing of when you feel like you're doing something embarrassing, most people aren't even noticing that you're doing anything. Like, that you're not pinging anyone else's radar typically. It's still good to take a lesson from that and try to avoid it. We don't want to sound like we're underwater again.
Melissa said there were audio issues with the Neanderthal episode, but it stands out as a favorite because I love Neanderthals. That was one where we absolutely we looked back because we tried a slightly different recording setup.
We recorded here while videoing instead of typically in my room.
And it was very funny because I listened to it once it was done and I went, Dr. Alex sounds great.
Yes.
The guest sounds great.
That's
that's important. That's the important part.
So yeah,
Jay said, "Did we guess it right on the Discord?" No, you have not guessed it right on the Discord. They were trying to guess because sometimes we put out teasers for the upcoming episodes, which we do kind of sporadically. Sometimes it doesn't happen because I forgot. Sometimes it doesn't happen because there just wasn't a good idea for what to do it. Sometimes things are running behind schedule and then it gets shoved off. So the group was trying to guess this upcoming episode without a teaser, and I commented. I said it would be fun. It would be incredible if you somehow managed to guess the episode topic without any teaser.
Yeah.
You did not guess it. None of you have guessed it.
So yeah, and Spook-E falls into this where every now and then someone after a Spook-E could come up, they're like, "Oh, you didn't mention this case of them," and there are times where I'm like, "Oh yeah, I didn't come across that like while looking for it." So like, there's stuff I miss, and sometimes I'll miss stuff, and someone will mention, I'll go, "Oh, I'm bummed I didn't come across that because that's cool. I wish I had learned about that just for my own self." And then other times, like, well, you can't get all of it. And then there are other times where someone will mention it and I'll go, yeah, no. That is one of the big ones, isn't it?
One of my worst regrets is a Spook-E. The one that I'm like, I'm so annoyed at me was Harpies. We did all of it. And I remember we had a whole extensive conversation about what would a gliding primate like animal be like, and we had this whole conversation, and it was after the episode that I went, Colugos.
Yep,
that is an animal that exists. I was so mad at myself. We got through the whole episode and forgot that Colugos existed.
Yep. And so
it happens sometimes. Well, and Spook-E, one of the cool things about Spook-E and Silver Screen are very much like this. The main series episodes are a lot of work. We put in a ton of work to get background information. We research the topic. We structure it's an hour-long discussion for this topic. Spook-E and our other side stuff, part of the goal is for it to be easier and a bit nicer. So with Spook-E, the first part, the history, the description of the monster or whatever, Will goes into that. You put together notes, you get that information, but it's meant to be the stakes aren't quite as high. It's just, here's a general overview, here's some general information. And then the second half is fully improv. Mm-hmm. It's just, we're just having a conversation. Because it's meant to be just sort of fun. So when we miss stuff in Spook-E, I never feel too bad about it. Because it's like, I didn't do any research ahead of this. This is all just what I have off the top of my head.
And I always try to keep in mind, and this is still the case with Spook-E, even though we only do it once a year, but we do 4 each year, is something I think of all the time with our normal episodes of, if we, as long as we're not just putting out wrong information.
Sure.
If we miss a bit, and where we go, oh, that probably would have made a lot of sense to describe or explain more in that episode. This concept that would have fit really well in there, and we just forgot about it, or got too focused on another part of it, whatever it was. I always have tried to remind of but we now are working toward hundreds of episodes.
Yes.
So we can come back around, we can get that topic later. Same with Spook-E of if we miss an idea for a cool way to evolve a monster, we can probably get back to using that cool idea with something else.
We have to be ready to acknowledge that A, we are not perfect, and B, we're always learning. Science is always adjusting, so we will all we always can come back around to stuff. But yes, we're absolutely self-conscious about those things. So we for sure are also thinking those things.
Yep.
Along with people who are pointing them out. Nerdbird said, my favorite thing is whenever I hear something in an episode and I say, that's so cool, out loud to myself, unintentionally in unison with one of you also saying it. That happens during, it used to happen during editing, and it will happen to me now if I go back and re-listen. I listened to, my girlfriend and I went on a trip recently, and we stopped at caves, at Natural, Caverns at Natural Bridge. And we were talking about stuff, and it made me think about our Caves episode. So we, on the drive, listened to the Caves episode, which I don't normally do, listen to our own episodes.
Yep.
But I listened through the Caves episode, and I laughed at everything that I laughed at in the episode, which is a very self-serving feeling thing to do. It's just the whole just driving along, laugh. Oh, boy, these guys are hilarious. Especially that one guy. He keeps saying everything he says is fantastic.
Yep.
I agree with all of it.
I have that while editing constantly. It's just yeah, that's what that is what I would have said in response to that.
It also, we've got people here talking about our links to other podcasts.
Yeah.
So Ryan said, I started listening on the episode that Garrett and Sabrina were on. Garrett and Sabrina from I Know Dino.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, boy. Oh, I don't know what episode they were on. I know what all the episode topics are. I don't.
Yeah.
I can never tell you what the news was.
Yep. No.
It was somewhere in the vicinity of 160 because we were on theirs right after 161, which was Sleep. Because we went on and we talked about sleep.
Yep.
And I was like, that Sleep's a weird episode for us to get to talk about. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And also we've got people here talking about, Jay said the Leaky Darwin Day episode turned me into origin stories.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. We love getting to support and engage with other podcast people.
I also saw a comment from Otaku Freak that was mentioning a story of the red dragon on the Welsh flag.
Oh, yeah.
Defending the Welsh people from the white dragon on the English flag being one of those.
Oh, that's cool.
That's a story. And yeah, that will happen all the time where someone was like, have you also heard or this didn't come up in the discussion of this story of them. And sometimes it's moments of, I did come across that, but it wasn't specific enough, didn't add something that I felt I needed to mention. And then other times we already had enough to go with. Mm-hmm. But there's plenty of times where that comes up and I'm like, that actually, I wish I had known about that. I didn't come across, that one I didn't come across while looking up the dragon stuff. Another one someone mentioned on the Discord is Maud and the Wyvern, which is a story about a young girl who befriends a wyvern hatchling.
Yeah.
And is a whole story about a friendly wyvern, or an attempt at a friendly wyvern. It doesn't go well.
Sure. It's like Rascal.
Yeah.
They have to let the raccoon. They have to let the wyvern go at the end of the story, and then suddenly wyverns are invasive in Japan.
Yeah. And so it's every now and then are moments like that, and I always appreciate it because then I get to learn more about it. But yeah, there's tons of times where I just miss the story because there's so many dragon stories in this case. But even with other monsters, of like, no, technically that could be mentioned here, but I didn't see it come up in most of the things I was looking up. So I'm going to lean toward the things they were referencing more often.
I had a great moment, speaking of Dragons on the Flag, that trip that my girlfriend and I went on. We also went to the Met in New York, and we went to the weapons and armor room because, yeah, that's where you go. And there were a bunch of banners, like flags with the heraldic symbols on them, and it was so cool because we had just we had finished Spook-E. It was about to come out, and so I got to look around and be like, oh yeah, I was looking for dragons on the flags, which was pretty darn cool.
Yeah.
So. Yes. Mark said the paleo art episode got me into Squamates. Awesome. That was with Gabriel. And Ryan said Sicilians. Yes, it was 162 was the episode after Sleep. When Sicilians was the one that Sabrina and Garrett were on. And I remember noting that because that was also, they were going to be on in the news. And I remember thinking, this is a weird episode. You get to be in the news for this nonsense group of animals.
Yep.
Which is pretty fun. So yes, that was Sicilians. Emily said, "I'm astonished that you can remember the topic for each episode number." I've got spreadsheets in my brain. Mila has mentioned Discovering Darwin, which is what Sarah Bray is on. Which that was the other thing. Somebody earlier, I meant to mention this and then I forgot, said that the website should have a section for our guest appearances. It does. If you under About Us and Work With Us, there is a section for where we've been guests, and it's linked somewhere else on the website as well. It's not just from there, but there is a page on the website that has all the podcast episodes that we have appeared on. In fact, guest appearances is linked from a few places on the website. I'll go ahead and put it here in the thing.
There you go. And if you want to find all of the guests we've had, we have a playlist on YouTube with every episode that has had someone else in it.
Yes.
Of our stuff. So you can find an entire playlist of our special guests.
And our website on that same page that I just linked has a list of our guest episodes, and our guest episode blog posts are now tagged as guest episodes. So we're starting to organize those things a bit more now that we've got 170 plus episodes, which is tons of fun.
Yep.
Well.
Ooh, I just saw JD said, random thing, the unicorn is the national animal of Scotland because it's the natural enemy of the lion, which is England's national animal.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff like that comes up. And it's tons of fun. We mentioned this, I can't remember if we said this in the QD, but the unicorn we mentioned this in a Patreon live stream for sure. The unicorn has been my driving reason to majorly want to do QD, because we haven't done a medieval monsters yet, but that list has been sitting there ready to go pretty much, and I've always looked at it and been like, but it'll be weird not to mention the unicorn in that episode. That'll be weird. But then it's a unicorn, and that's...
Right. And they can be monstrous.
Yeah, they definitely can, but
But it's a unicorn.
It's a unicorn.
QD is a great place to do stuff like unicorns.
The most famous picture of it is not a spooky created as a beautiful unicorn sitting in a field with butterflies, or
Yes.
That would be weird among the others to purposely try to lean into the spooky side. And that's not the way I want to do. I want to do... a friendly unicorn. So that's been like the animal that really made me want to do QD more than anything else.
So someday
Mm-hmm.
that'll happen. As we're coming up on an hour and a half, and I feel perfectly comfortable starting the wrap up here because we're going to be rambling for a bit because that is the way that I.
That is how the comment is
that is
to
how
do.
that is how we do it. Emily says there a way that you can make a list of just the news discussions and their associated episodes. That is a good question.
Yeah, I mean that wouldn't be too hard.
Yeah.
I could go through it and
we can think about doing stuff. Yeah,
pull that out.
We have so much content now that we have to start thinking of new ways to organize it.
Yep.
Because it's untenable.
Yep. The website, the blog portion of the website is searchable. So if you remember a particular news, since we put descriptions for each news in there, it probably won't be 100% hit since we don't have the entire synopsis of the news. But if you search for a particular news, you usually can find it in the episodes. I've done that before. I'm we talked about this.
What episode?
What was the article? Because I don't even remember what the publication was now.
I know what the topic of every episode was. I could not tell you what the news. That is not where I'm. That's not on my spreadsheet.
Yep. I have the things we've discussed in the news vaguely. So that's why it comes up in the episode all the time. Of we mentioned this, didn't we? This was a news because this was recent research, and that'll happen all the time. But no memory. That could have been 12 episodes ago or 50. So yeah.
Spooky season is officially over. As soon as this live stream ends, it will be the end of spooky season. But that does not mean that we can't continue to celebrate. If you want to send us suggestions for episodes for spooky stuff, you are welcome to do so.
Yes.
If you have fan art, you are welcome to share it with us. Continue to engage with spooky stuff. The Discord has a spooky channel in it.
Yeah.
You can find that link on our website as well. The spooky channel is open all year round. It is obviously most active around this time of the year. There's also a speculative evolution channel in the Discord where people enjoy talking about speculative stuff. So we have created space for people to engage on these topics because we know that people really enjoy going into them, and we love getting this engagement from our crew, from our audience, from the people who are fans of the podcast. And we love doing live stream stuff like this. It's awesome to get to engage with people, to talk back and forth, to answer questions, to address comments and stuff, to hear what people are thinking. This is tons of fun.
It's great.
We do live streams regularly with our patrons, but we've been talking about doing more of these sort of public live streams for events. The idea of a spooky live stream is tons of fun. This one went this has been a lot of fun, so we might do this again in the future. We will have our anniversary live stream coming up on 7 years for the podcast in January. So there's going to be other stuff like this. So continue to keep your ears and eyes and stuff out to engage, because this is really fun for us.
Yeah, we love doing live streams because it's it's easy to set up, and we like things that are easy for us to do.
Yes.
And
again, like we were saying with Spook-E, no notes.
No notes.
No notes are needed.
No prep.
We just sit down and talk.
I just had to put on clothes that looked like I'd been awake longer than I have.
Yep, and only the top half.
Yeah. And the other aspect is it's Q&A, which we love doing Q&As. We could do Q&As for endless amounts of time because it is just pure. For me, it very often feels like education in its purest form.
Right.
Of just people seeking.
What do you want to learn about?
Yes. Seeking information.
Here is the answer.
Providing and exploring that information, and just that continuous, and that, I don't know, that just is very satisfying. It's very fulfilling. So I'm happy to do it all the time.
Speaking of Q&As.
Okay, yeah. I did that segue on purpose.
Yeah, we're really good. We are coming up on the end of the year, and every end of the year we do an end of the year Q&A. We have questions from our patrons that we answer on regular episodes, but at the end of the year Q&A, anyone can submit a question. You can submit it on whatever topic you want to hear us talk about. The Q&A submission form is officially open as of yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
There is a link on the website. There are links. I've started posting links. I put one up on Facebook. There's one on the Discord. We're going to start sharing that and reminding people. The Q&A submission form will be open for 1 month. On December 10th, it closes, and then we record the whole thing, however many hours it is. And we will answer as many questions as we can get to. The end of the year Q&A is another one of our traditions, and it is so much fun. So if you have more questions, more things you'd like to hear us talk about, check out that forum and send those questions our way.
Yeah, the end of the year Q&A is it is always daunting because it is a big project, but it is so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's so great. We get a mixture of sciencey questions and fun questions and lighthearted and nonsense questions, and they're all great.
Yep. We've already gotten, I think, about 20. They're already rolling in, and there's some good ones in there. There was at least one that I saw that I was like, that's really cool. That's really fun. So yeah. Well, if there's any other questions that people have while I reiterate all that stuff, if you want to prolong the thing. Otherwise, we can start wrapping up. This was our first ever Spook-E Livestream. I think that it has been a roaring success. Thank you all so much for coming to join. We will be doing more live stream stuff in the future. The next live stream we do will be, the next big public live stream will be our 7-year live stream.
Yeah.
And on that live stream, we will also be making our giveaway announcement.
Yes, our Patreon giveaway.
Over the summer, we hit 500 patrons, which was a monumental milestone for us. So we celebrated by adding new tiers to the Patreon with new benefits, one of which is almost ready. The t-shirt. Rob's been working on the t-shirt design, and it's so cool. It's so cool. We're very excited to put it out. But we're also, to finish up that big celebration, doing a giveaway.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyone who is a patron by the end of this year will be eligible to win. We're going to draw names, and people will get fabulous prizes. The top prize will be all of the prizes, and we will be announcing that on that anniversary live stream in January. So be sure to check that out as well. All right. Well, I think we are at time. This has been our rambling episode. This has been our rambling outro, our tradition. Spook-E was fantastic. We will be back.
Yes.
There will be a Spook-E 2024 next year. We don't know what the topic is going to be yet, and even if we did, we wouldn't tell you because we like to do the dramatic reveal.
Yep.
I got to dramatically reveal this year's theme in person a couple times, which was just so much fun.
Very satisfying. So yeah, no, I haven't had any inklings particularly, but there's concepts ready to go pretty much.
Yes. Serpentine said, I asked a while back about the website donate button. Yeah, you did, and I forgot to address it. There is a donate button on the website.
Oh, yeah.
I forget what the question was, but yes, there is a donate button on the website. If we don't get to the answer that here, feel free to ask. Find us in the Discord or send us a message or something, and we'll make sure.
It
should be working.
A PayPal donation.
Yes.
And it's also connected in the link tree, which is linked in every episode description.
Yes.
So.
All right. Thank you all one more time so much for joining us. We will do more Spook-E in the future. We will have more live streams and stuff. The next episode comes out this evening, so that is out for the weekend. That is episode 178. So make sure you listen in and enjoy that episode. And otherwise, we're going to get out of here.
Yeah.
Thank you all again. Enjoy Spook-E. Enjoy your November now.
Yes.
Sign off phrase.
Sign off. Bye, everybody.